Welcome everybody. I'm Ed Rogoff. I'm an advisor to Lumos Learning. And I should say that my involvement with Lumos Learning goes back to when the founder of Lumos Learning was a student of mine in an MBA class. And he had young children who were preparing for state exams in New Jersey, and the preparation materials that the school was giving had very little to do with the exam that his kids had to take at the end of the term. And he said somebody should create materials that are relevant for what the kids need. And that was the start of Lumos Learning, which is about 13 years ago. And Mukunda, who I assume is on this call somewhere, has been a dedicated, serious leader in building this company, expanding its products, and being committed to the mission of helping students. So this program is an expansion of a series of programs that we ran for principals and district superintendents on issues of distance learning and technology. And after we did that, I think it was a series of 5, and they were well received. We said maybe we should do something for parents. And so this is the first in our series of programs for parents to cover relevant issues for distance and hybrid learning in this new environment. And this will be posted on the Lumos website, like the other programs we created, so people can access them anytime. And that's turned out to be a successful thing. Many people have accessed those ones that we did already, and I'm sure that'll be true about this. So this program is about we set out to say, what can we tell parents in an hour that will help them the best way possible to support their child's success in this environment of distance and hybrid learning. And towards that end, we have 3 fantastic experts who have agreed to join us and to share their wisdom and experience. And I'm going to give them the briefest possible introductions, ask them to expand on their backgrounds as they relate to this if they want. But Maureen Healy is our first speaker, and she's an author. She's written on these topics, and a common speaker, a frequent speaker, I should say. Dr. Newton Miller, going to talk about goal setting and managing the process, and Megan Tenney, who's going to talk about homeschooling, and she's got a very interesting background and experience with this. And in essence, COVID and hybrid learning has made all of us into homeschoolers, at least some of the time. So what are we going to cover? We're going to try to cover all these topics in an hour: promoting social emotional learning, communicating with teachers, what free tools and learning resources are available that parents might want to avail themselves of, what available financial support there is, how to manage the process of learning at home, and where applicable, supporting special ed requirements, which is a huge issue in this environment. So Maureen, with the minimal introduction, I'm going to hand it off to you to talk about these issues of dealing with social emotional issues with educating your kid, participating in educating your child from home. So welcome, Maureen.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. Let's see, what can I say? My background is children's emotional health and development. I have worked with parents and children around the world. My last book is The Emotionally Healthy Child. And I work a lot in the classroom with teachers and with parents regarding learning styles and learning differences, as well as how do we build that emotional and social intelligence in the classroom, whether it's at home or whether it's distance or whether it's in hybrid education. Right now, we're dealing with lots of different things. So that's my background. And I write for Psychology Today, and there's lots of different specific concepts I drill down in. But we can go to the next slide. Okay, great. So social emotional learning. So I just wanted to give an overview of the concept of emotional health and then drill into strategies. And I'll take any questions that pop in. I'm happy to take them and answer them on the fly. That's always, from my perspective, the really interesting, I think we get the most out of questions. So emotional health is really the skill of balance. So the idea is that, just because of living, we're thrown off balance. And the idea of helping students and parents and children, we want to build that emotional intelligence. So that self-awareness. So what are emotions, and then ultimately, what do we do with them? So in your ideal scenario, they're doing part of that at school. But I know that in the distance learning, it presents a unique challenge because, there might be 2 or 3 people in the same room with headsets doing work and school, and mom's managing 3 kids or dad's managing 2 kids, or however it's working out. There's a lot of different pieces of the puzzle. But the idea is that we want to help children identify their emotions and learn how to express them constructively. And that's different for a kindergartner than it is for a high school student. And that's different for a middle schooler versus a college student. So being able to really help kids early on. And I also think from my own personal perspective, and this may not be a popular thought, but I really do believe there's no academic emergency right now. We are really in a global health crisis and a financial crisis. And if I look at the upside, the potential silver lining of the pandemic, it could be that we're helping our children learn how to be more resilient. We're helping them learn how to be stronger from the inside out. So there are a lot of teachable moments, whether it's helping a child identify the discomfort of wearing a mask or the discomfort of being on Zoom, or helping them create a space, whether it's a physical space or an emotional space, where they feel like there are some things that they can focus on that they can control, whether it's, some things are clearly out of their control, but how do we help them in this present moment, stay as calm as possible and make good choices and engage in school. I mean, I know that is part of the difficulty, is staying tuned in when you can mute people, or when you can just walk away and say, I've had plenty of students I've worked with recently, they just say when they've had enough at school, they just slam down the laptop and say there must have been a technical difficulty. So I get it. There's a low level of frustration. So this is where I think that, it's not about doing more per se, it's just sort of the low hanging fruit. What are the tools that we can help ourselves and our children? Because I'm a big believer that children mirror our own experience. So if we're angry and frustrated, they're going to pick up on that and then send it back to us even bigger. So we want to do our best to stay calm and remember that, okay, we, one moment to the next moment. Let's not speed ahead. Let's do the right thing. And these are big choices I know that we have to make. So whether our kids go back to school or whether we continue distance learning, these are really big choices. And there's no right choice. You have to just choose what's right for your family. And using this time constructively to be able to help children really learn how to recognize that they're bigger than their feelings, whether they run hot with anger. There's a child that would be irritated, annoyed, frustrated, then angry, then mad. So learning how, or they run cold, right? They disconnect, they get sad, they get into a funk, and we're not all one thing or another. Our emotions come and go, but helping them learn how to identify and express them and giving them those tools. And since emotional health is a lifelong endeavor, it's really not a box that we check. It's not like K-8 or high school. You go, oh, I did that, I'm done, I'll never have to do it again. It's no, 1 week we're learning tolerance, another week we're learning compassion, another week we're learning forgiveness, another week is conflict resolution. So it's learning together as a family, creating a common language and helping your child or tween or teen identify it. And, maybe one child, needs to go for a run, or one child needs to hit a punching bag, or one child needs to take deep breaths, or one child needs to, walk away from the computer and have a brain break. I'm a big believer that, we can sustain our attention like adults for about 90 minutes if they're really good. But kids, depending on their age and stage, is like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour. They really need frequent breaks. And also they need a way to restore themselves, whether it's to go outside, take a few deep breaths, whether it's to lay down with a pillow on their head, whatever helps them, whether they need to go read. I think these are all ways that we're helping them learn, not just for today, but what self-care, what emotional health is, what is it going to, the things you do today will be planting the seeds for long-term health and well-being. So navigating that and learn, I guess my point is that we want to learn together. So I did have a family, because this is a stressful time. And I recommended to them that they use, what do you call it? Like 3 good things, the scientific method of like every night, at the dinner table, why don't we all go around and talk about the 3 good things that happened from the day? And obviously there are days where it's really easy. You're like, I had pizza, I went for a hike, I got to go to the beach, or I got to see my friend. There are days that it's easy and there are other days that it's hard. But they proved that after 28 days that your brain starts to look for the good things that are happening throughout the day. You say, oh, wait, that's a good thing. And those kind of small strategies are really helpful, not just for the child, but I could tell when I was talking to the parents after they've done it for 2 weeks, they're like, this has been really helpful for us as adults. So we do have to really train the mind and look for the constructive things, even when it's a challenge. So regarding distance learning and hybrid education, we want to create a space where there are some good things in it, right? Where there's a nice spot, where there's some wins, and to create something where we, have some structure and there's some flexibility, and then there are some strategies that your child uses. And that's really, really important. So I don't know if there's any questions that came in, or if anyone's thinking anything. I know you're probably all on mute, so I can't hear you anyway. But I did want to throw it out there. So I guess, again, from my standpoint, it's really the resilience that's really important in building that resilience, and those regular strategies, whether it's taking deep breaths or, learning, like my book, In the Emotionally Healthy Child, I have a lot of different strategies on how to identify and express emotions constructively. And the first step is really working on self-awareness and mindfulness, just paying attention, what's even happening right now. And then, having language to talk about it or to express it constructively. Some of us are more verbal than others when we're having a big feeling, but giving a child tools at their age and stage is really important. In particular, there's a checklist I'll share now. It's called the Smart Choices Checklist. And the idea is that a smart choice is when it's good for you and good for others. So if you're really angry, and, I worked with a kid who was really angry, and she threw a notebook across the classroom and it hit another kid. Obviously, that got rid of her anger, but not really a good choice because it hurt someone else. So, that's a choice. It's not a smart choice. So smart choices are good for you and good for others. So I often work with kids and say, okay, when you're having a big feeling, what are your smart choices? What can you do at home? List 3 things. Or what can you do in the classroom? Or here, what can we do in the distance classroom when we're really feeling annoyed or agitated or frustrated? So the idea is that you want to prepave a path, and you want to help them before that moment occurs. Recognize, I could walk away, I could throw water on my face in the bathroom, I could get a sip of water. Like, what can you do when you're having a big emotion? Can you take a 5-minute break? How do you handle that big frustration or challengings or irritations? Because we want to give kids those tools so they can navigate it. And it was funny. I was visiting an old client of mine recently, and, unbeknownst to me, his teacher didn't know, but he called her up, even though he's doing distance learning, saying, hey, I have a friend coming to visit me, and she's coming from San Francisco, and can I can I, skip class and meet with her? And the teacher said, of course, I think it's really important for you to connect. I mean, the teacher didn't know it wasn't another 10-year-old boy, it was an adult. But the idea that giving kids the tools and power to make some choices on their own and then keep course correcting them to keep moving in a positive direction is really our role. And that includes sometimes you have to say no to something, or sometimes you have to navigate some tricky situations. But, the whole goal is building that resilience, that emotional intelligence, keeping kids connected, learning and engaging in a meaningful and purposeful way. I'm not a big believer in just like school, just checking off time, just, doing your time in school. I think you really need to stay engaged and learn. And of course, experiential learning is really important, but, having direct experiences where you feel like, oh my God, they really see me, I'm connected, I feel good, is more important than ever right now.
There's a question about how should a parent handle it when the schools or the teacher's guidance is for the child to spend hours a day online. And that sort of violates what the sensible, smart advice you're giving, which is attention spans. We all have human attention spans, not computer attention spans. That there's no time left for other constructive activities. So, where do you suggest they go with that when they have that conflict between the school's guidance and sensible guidance?
Right. Yeah, it's a really good question because, every situation is different. Every child is different. Their learning needs and personality and sort of threshold for what feels appropriate. I mean, I can say that the screen time has been an issue. It does impact your nervous system. It does make you a little more agitated after many, many hours online. So I think that if I was the parent, I would be having a dialogue with the school teacher and administrators and trying to, opposed to just focusing on it as a problem, which I get, see if we can problem solve anything, see if there's any sort of accommodation or anything that we can do that makes sense for you and your child, because we do want to have meaningful and purposeful learning. And I think just spending time hours and hours and hours and hours and hours online isn't always helpful per se. And I would even say, hey, listen, my son or daughter is XYZ, that they have, they're very sensitive to this environment, or, could we go online 2 hours and then get the homework assignments offline and then report back to you? Because we want to honor the goal of the school, which is really to keep kids engaged and connected and learning. But, online doesn't work for everyone all the time. So coming up with creative solutions, I think, is just part of this process. This is, I think, out of the pandemic, when we get to the other side, we will have so many more creative solutions in life because the universe has forced us to do this. And that includes children. I mean, I want to empower kids to be able to be appropriate, but to voice like, hey, this is working for me or this isn't working for me. And how do we do that? And so I'm a big believer in partnership. How do we partner and make solutions? So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. I think also your focus on building resilience during this period is a wonderful, positive, constructive approach to take. So that's fantastic. So Maureen, if you're okay, we'll move on to the next speaker.
Yes, let's just go through the other slides quick, and I probably don't have anything to say, but let's just pop them in.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Okay.
The emotional language is more just like making sure there was a language in the home that we're all speaking the same language. And I guess the only other thing I want to highlight from this slide is really emotional health is flexibility. I know that a lot of kids sometimes get stuck. They're stubborn or strong-willed, and listen, I'm one of those people. And the upside is that you can stay with problems longer and come up with amazing solutions. But sometimes it's difficult when you put your feet in and say, I cannot do this. It doesn't help emotional health or emotional intelligence. So another way to think of emotional health besides the skill of balance is also to think about you're helping your son or daughter learn the skill of flexibility. And of course, distance learning, we've had to pivot, we've had to be flexible. So that's just another thing to think about. And I guess, my website is growinghappykids.com, and I'm happy to connect with people offline if there's additional questions as well. But I'm grateful, Ed, and you can slide it to the next speaker. And I think that this is a wonderful thing for us to connect about.
Terrific. No, fantastic. Thank you so much. We may, if we, time permitting, we may circle back with you with questions, but, we understand you need to jump off.